Smartphone cameras are getting pretty crazy. I mean, OPPO's not just putting a huge sensor on this phone, they're putting up huge megapixel numbers all over the place. So let's see how this works out in a travel scenario and get into a real-world camera test. Hey, it's Joshua Vergara. What's going on, everybody? Here is a real-world camera test with the OPPO Find X6 Pro. Alright, first thing we're going to do is get the camera specs out of the way because it's actually pretty simple. Every single camera here on the rear is 50 megapixels. You get a 50 megapixel IMX989 1-inch style sensor, there's a 50 megapixel main ultra-wide camera, and a 50 megapixel main telephoto camera. Now, if you notice that I use the word main with every single one of those cameras, well, that's because that's how OPPO wants us to look at these particular sensors and lenses here, because they want to say there are 3 main cameras, not just one, because every single one of them is pretty powerful. And you know what? Their claim is actually fairly sound. Alright, the tea's ready. Making it in one of my favorite ways to make tea, but we'll talk about this maybe some other time. The tea I'm drinking today is actually from one of the tea shops that I went to in San Francisco while using the OPPO Find X6 Pro. And you did not see me put leaves into this because I'm actually on my second steep. That's one of my favorite parts about tea, is the fact that you can have multiple steeps, so the drink doesn't have to just be for that one time. For this tea break though, I actually wanted to do things a little bit differently and give you a look into my creation process. Specifically sound, and why it's so important for my videos, obviously because of my voice. It's one of the main aspects of my videos. That's why I actually have microphones in the shot so that it is closer to me, and that way it's able to record a lot more effectively. And as you can see, I'm rocking a new microphone courtesy of the sponsor of this video, Logitech. This microphone is the Logitech Blue Sona, a dynamic XLR microphone that you can actually get on Amazon right now, and I have links to it in the description and in a pinned comment below. First off, you can already see throughout much of this video that the mic is a good looker, adding its own little bit of aesthetic to my videos. It even comes with a replacement cover if you want to add a little splash of color, but red is just not my particular color. But of course, it's all about sound quality, and the hypercardioid pattern that this dynamic microphone provides is really good at isolating my voice and eliminating a lot of the background noise that might be happening here in my office. In simple terms, a hypercardioid pattern means that anything right in front of the microphone is exactly what it will pick up, with minimal background noise being picked up because of this very tight cone that it is actually registering. But on top of all of that, there are some really good features on here that support that audio quality. The mic has what is called clear amp tech. Essentially, there is a built-in amp that gives the microphone plus 25 decibels of gain. Normally, a dynamic mic needs to be as close to the subject as possible to get good sound, but I can get a little bit of distance from the Blue Sona and still get really good sound because of the amp actually amplifying its pickup range. So I can have the mic in the shot like you've already seen, or I can have it just outside of frame. It's actually right here. Normally you'd have to buy an extra booster with other mics for the same effect, but it's all built into the Blue Sona. Just plug the XLR connector into your existing audio interface or recorder and you're good to go. The mic also has a couple of toggles hidden under a magnetic cover on the back for a low pass filter and a presence booster to amplify the midtones of my voice. And when paired with the Blue Compass boom arm, the Blue Sona can get into position pretty easily, especially with the tighteners on the joints. I've already done a couple of videos, including the one you're watching right now, using the Blue Sona, and I'm really impressed by it and so far really happy using it. Again, it's a great out-of-the-box setup, complete with a good look, a built-in shock mount, the built-in amp, and the sound quality that I would need for one of the most important aspects of my videos, my voice. Check out the Logitech Blue Sona in the links in the description below and in the pinned comments, and thanks to Logitech for letting me try out the Blue Sona and for sponsoring this video. So as with my camera tests moving forward, I am doing my best to actually put a little bit of that elbow grease in, just lower down the exposure a little bit for all the photos, and ideally for videos as well, just to show that, you know, you can get some really great photos and videos out of here with just a little bit of a tweak here and there. Mainly because smartphone cameras tend to come in really hot. Like, they tend to have overexposure like right off the bat. So if you just lower that down a little bit, you'll get those results that you really want. And I want to make sure that I actually showcase that here and be more mindful of all of that. But there's one thing that I am a little bit miffed by as far as the camera app is concerned and what modes are available here. But I'll get to that in a second. Of course, we can't forget about this front-facing camera. It is a 32 megapixel sensor, but I'm just going to go ahead and show you some of the selfies right now. As with most phones coming out of China, anything that has to do with selfies tends to be a little bit softer. You can mitigate that a little bit by turning off all of the beautify settings and whatnot. But the other thing about this front-facing camera that is a little bit irksome is, well, it doesn't do 4K. Also, it looks a little bit soft, a little bit blown out actually on the viewfinder. A little bit of a bummer there to start off, but these rear cameras though, the 3 main cameras, that's what the main story is about. And I am going to be throwing a lot of camera samples, both photo and video, in here from a recent trip to San Francisco, but I'm going to go ahead and let you tell me what you think in the comment sections down below, so don't forget to voice off there. The main sensor brings that raw power given the size of the sensor. It is again the IMX989, the 1-inch style sensor that we are starting to see pop up in some other flagship phones as well. It does rock some pretty great stabilization and a good shallow depth of field, which is what we would expect from a sensor size like this. In case you want to get much closer to your subject, there is a macro shooter on here, but it is via the ultra-wide sensor. That is something I had to be fairly mindful of because the moment you get just close enough to a subject, it does move over to the macro mode, but because it's moving to the ultra-wide sensor technically, you are losing a little bit of that shallow depth of field. If you want to get close enough to a subject while maintaining usage of the other sensors, you just got to remember to head over to the setting over here, auto macro, and turn that off. But speaking of depth of field, the telephoto is also a quite pleasant surprise given its f2.6 aperture. The periscope telephoto lens is obviously going to be good for those zooms that you want, but it is going to also be a great shooter for portraits. And with portraiture, you want to have a little bit of that background compression while having shallow depth of field to just let your subject pop even better. It is also a 3x zoom, which gives you a little bit more reach compared to some of the typical 2x shooters out there. And because this is a 50 megapixel sensor, cropping into it digitally for that hybrid zoom does get you a pretty good looking 6x zoom photo. Oh, and did I mention that the telephoto and the ultra-wide cameras are using a sensor that is typically used as the main cameras on other flagships? OPPO's definitely doing their best to really bolster every single shooter on the back. That's why they want to call this 3 main cameras. Now I know this is a camera test, but we should talk about just how powerful this phone actually is. The phone in my hand is a China-only edition, so I'm not actually going to talk much about the day-to-day usage of the OPPO Find X6 Pro. I mean, the lack of Google Play services is something that you can kind of get around. I can certainly still get the apps that I want on this particular phone, but the one thing that is going to be missing that I use every single day, Android Auto. It's just not going to work with my car because apparently Android Auto is on the ROM level. It's not just something you can download, and if you do, it's just going to show Android Auto on the screen of the phone. It won't connect to any automobiles. Of course, we get flagship level specs on here, including the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, which is going to provide great performance on here with up to 16 gigabytes of RAM and 512 gigabytes of storage. And it's all coming through a beautiful AMOLED display that can actually get super bright. The design is actually quite svelte. There is a bit of a curve to the display, but there is also a 5000 milliamp hour battery in here that is capable of 100 watt wired charging and even 50 watt wireless charging. So clearly, OPPO wasn't just trying to find balance with this phone, they actually wanted to provide anything and everything they possibly could. And all encased in an IP68 rated body, so there's plenty of water and dust resistance on here. Now, I don't have the fancy two-tone color that you might have seen some other creators rock, but I do think that this black edition is still quite nice. There's a bit of a matted feel to the back here, which gives it a good amount of grip, even though the included case has provided even more of that. And honestly, this phone might be at the top of the list in terms of how it handles big camera packages. I mean, putting it into this circle on the back, that way everything seems more or less centered, is a really good move and gives the phone a pretty cohesive look. In all honesty, I imagine that a global version of this phone might one day cross borders, and then we will get a version of this with Google Play services on it, but that's just speculation on my part, and in the end, only time and OPPO's release strategy will tell. So let's get back to the cameras. In the app, there's actually not a whole lot to really inundate you as far as modes or settings are concerned. Photo, video, you do get a Pro mode over here, but I do have a thought about Video Pro mode. Actually, in this case, it is called the Movie mode. So there is a Movie mode on this phone that allows you to change up everything from the shutter speed to the ISO, to the exposure compensation, which is one of the main reasons why I would use a mode like that. The problem is that the Movie mode, while it gives you all of that control, it's always going to be this super wide angle, this super wide aspect ratio. And also, if you take a look at the details of the file, it's not quite 4K, just a bit over 1080p. Like, it's higher resolution, but you don't get a whole lot of options when it comes to the actual resolution. It would be great to have the Movie mode where you can just get regular 4K, or you can just get a different resolution rather than this aspect ratio that you're seeing right now.
So yeah, I mean, it all makes it look pretty cool, and I'm glad that it's a higher resolution, but not a whole lot of extra options aside from that. It's almost as if giving full control over the video is not really a priority here.
And as you can see, there are a few other modes that you can take advantage of, but I didn't really go into those a whole lot during this test. I just wanted to see what the raw power would be able to provide. I tried using night mode a little bit, but it mainly helped out when using the ultra-wide camera. After all, its specs are just a bit down there compared to the main sensor. And in the auto mode, it will automatically move over to using a longer exposure anyway. But on top of all of that, the main sensor is already doing a really good job in low light situations, certainly in places where there's plenty of light, maybe from buildings or street lights or anything else, including in indoor situations as you have been seeing in this video.
Alright, we're getting all of the indoor video, the low light video, low light photos and videos out of the way. Next phase of this video, we're straight up here at the House of Prime Rib in San Francisco. As you can see, very warm lighting, a little bit dark, but here you go. Some food photos coming up right now.
So what about this whole Hasselblad thing? Well, we pretty much just have to get used to seeing that word or that logo on the back of these cameras, and mainly Hasselblad have been adding in a little bit of their expertise and color science to add on to OPPO's own processing. The main thing that Hasselblad kind of put into here is in the portrait mode, where Hasselblad influenced the bokeh rendering so that they can enhance that shallow depth of field. While the cutouts are never perfect on any smartphone, what I have seen coming out of this phone using the portrait mode, especially at 3x, has looked quite nice. I've been very impressed with the portraits coming out of this phone. And if you don't necessarily want that reach, you can go over to the 1x within the portrait mode. Effectively, what you get here is a 65mm equivalent in the 3x and a 24mm equivalent in the 1x. And of course, if the logo on the back is not enough, you know that it's a Hasselblad, at least influenced camera, given the shutter sound. Add on top of all of that the fact that OPPO puts in their own dedicated chip in the Mari Silicon NPU that provides a lot of the processing and really does the heavy lifting as far as actually making the HDR work, the color science, and all of that. And you have processing on top of processing. Honestly, what impresses me the most about this camera system is how every sensor is actually trying to pull some sort of double duty so that you're covered no matter what your shooting scenario might be. That main sensor is going to be pretty much all-purpose, with great stabilization, especially for video. The ultra-wide sensor also doubles as the macro shooter. You just have to keep in mind when it is actually moving over to that sensor if you want to get a certain look in your photos. And then the telephoto shooter gets you up to 6 times hybrid zoom without much loss in quality. It also is a good portrait camera. And finally, it has a minimum focusing distance, so if you are at that 3x zoom, you can still get pretty close to your subjects, even if it's not quite the macro mode like from the ultra-wide. If anything, the OPPO Find X6 Pro is showing us how far we have come in many aspects of our smartphones, not just with the cameras, but also with the general specifications that are found throughout the device. Almost everything about this phone is as high-powered as you would want it to be, with the top-of-the-line specifications that are available in the general smartphone market now. Well, maybe minus the front-facing camera. And while this may not be a phone that I could use very effectively on the daily, at least for now, it was a good glimpse into the direction that smartphone cameras are going, not just from OPPO, but in general. And so, there you have it, a look at the OPPO Find X6 Pro in this real-world camera test. As I have said a couple of times already, let me know what you think of the photos and videos, their quality, the colors, all of that stuff in the comment sections down below, and let me know your general thoughts on this smartphone, even if it's just available in China for now. One more shout out and thanks to Logitech for sponsoring this video and for letting me check out the Blue Sona microphone. This is a fantastic microphone. I have really enjoyed using it, and if you want to check it out for yourself, I have links in the description and in a pinned comment below. But with all of that said, I'm going to go ahead and call it on this one. Thank you so much for watching. Please take care of yourselves and each other, and enjoy your tea, everybody.